Hey, folks, welcome back to HMBA 614 Health Services Management. I'm your professor, Professor Roberts, and it's week seven out of eight. So, you guys get to see the light at the end of the tunnel for this course, and you guys are doing excellent. When I look at the grade book, and I know you guys can keep it going. So, when we look at week seven here, we have two chapters that we're reading. So we have chapter 15 and 16. So 15 being negotiating and conflict management. This happens all the time in our daily lives. So this might be more of a refresh, or maybe you'll learn a little thing or something about this. I imagine most of you guys are probably close to experts on this in your daily lives, especially if you have children. You're it's like negotiating with terrorists. Um, because they're little and they take no prisoners. But you know, so you might have more experience than those that may not have children, or in other cases, just dealing with our coworkers can be just as demanding as small children. So, chapter 16, program management. So, what happens when we have multiple projects going on? So we have another level of project management. At a higher level, we can do program management. And there's another level beyond that called portfolio management. And we'll dive into that. But first, I can't neglect part three, the portfolio project. There's a couple last documents I need you guys to come up with. And it's really easy, these documents. So you guys should be able to knock these out real quick and do excellent like you guys have been doing on part one and part two. I'm impressed with how well you guys did part two. There's When it comes to those documents, there's really is no correct answer, but there's more right and more wrong answers. So looking at it, you guys all did excellent. You can obviously see your grades in the grade book, and um, you guys should be happy with your grades, I should say. All right, so let's move on to chapter 15, the reading. So, chapter 15, negotiating and conflict management. Like I said, people have varying levels of experience with this. Some people tend to avoid these situations, negotiation and conflict management, where others thrive in these areas. So, we really can break it down, both of these, into two areas: the logical and the emotional. So, negotiation, the logical, most people can understand somebody that's arguing from a logic or negotiating from a logical standpoint. I need these products. I'm only willing to pay this price. Will you sell them to me? And then the other party says, I understand you want those products, you want that price, but I need to get this price. So it's more logical. But as soon as you bring in the emotions, that is when things tend to get a little crazy. The best way I can describe the emotional side is if, for example, you're buying a vehicle at a dealership, whether it's new or used, they're going to use a lot of emotional strategies and tactics to get you to buy the vehicle. They're going to ask you to imagine driving this vehicle compared to your old vehicle. Or, if this is your first vehicle, they're going to say, well, wouldn't it be nice to have the freedom of the open road and all that kind of stuff? They're going to bring in that emotional. They're going to talk bad about your current car. So you start to think of badly about your car. Your car might be perfectly fine and will last maybe another 5, 10 years. But you've made the choice to consider a new vehicle or a different vehicle. So that's why you're there. Their job is to get you to buy or lease, depending on your preference. But they're going to use these tactics. They're going to try to kind of analyze you a little bit, maybe from a psychological standpoint, and find what makes you tick. And they're going to use that. And we use that in negotiation all the time. If you're talking about children, let's say small children, they want to play and have a good time or whatever drives them. They want to color, they want to play with Legos, they want to do whatever it is they want to do. They're playing on your emotions because they'll ask you in a very cute way, or they'll say, "Can you come and play with me?" And now you're like, "Aw," and now you go play with them because they asked you so nicely. Or maybe there's some peer pressure. And let's say your parents are in town and your child has asked you to play, and you kind of have that pressure. maybe it's not said pressure, but it's that peer pressure that you're going to go play with your child, even though, the adults are talking now or whatever the situation may be. So we have to be conscious of both of these components of negotiation and conflict management. Conflict usually goes from the emotional side. It's very heavy in the emotional side. I'm right, you're wrong. I can't be wrong, or that kind of thing. Or I'm the boss. I can't be wrong. I can't show that I'm not capable, or whatever the logic is, or the emotional thoughts behind it. Now, of course, there's logic in there too. Maybe the person who's arguing one side logically believes they are correct, which is perfectly rational if that's their thinking. So we gotta remember these two sides of it. Now, there's various types of negotiating. So if we focus on negotiating, you probably, if you think about all the times you were negotiating, or at least some of the recent times, you might have used one of these two or one of these four areas. So we have accommodation. These people tend to be the people pleasers. They accommodate. Like they don't really want to do something, but they'll agree to it. And we might have done that in some case, even if we use some of these other ones. Sometimes we negotiate and we feel it's a competition. I have to win. The other person must lose. Now, just to be stereotypical, men are usually from this point of view because of upbringings and environments. Competition is one of the aspects most men go from, but it's not all men. It's just a generalization. Compromise. So this one is from some literature that's been done. It's women tend to look at compromise and collaboration. Men also do it too, so it's not a one-sided thing. But women tend to lead towards these than the other ones. So compromise. I'll give up this if you give up that. So we both don't completely win, but we don't completely lose. Collaboration, we're working together to get a win that neither of us would have achieved separately. Um, so when we think of the types of negotiation we're using, we can go from all of these different angles. And depending on the situation, we can change our style of negotiation. Yes, we have our favorite depending on, your personal preferences. You might find that the accommodation one is the one you get the most success out of, and there's nothing wrong with that. Others might feel competition, compromise, or collaboration is their ticket to success. But overall, we're looking for that win-win outcome. If you have a situation where there's a loser, like a win-lose situation, the other party or the party that lost is going to be less likely to negotiate in the future. They may not negotiate in the future depending on how badly they felt because of that situation. So we want to make sure there's a win-win. We can't just take all the victory for ourselves or the other side takes all the victory because it doesn't feel good if we know we lost. And I'm sure we've all felt that at one part where we felt we lost in a negotiation, whether it was a salary negotiation, negotiating with children, negotiating with let's say, a civic organization we're a part of, or anything like that. It doesn't feel good to lose, but we feel great when we win. So why not let both sides win? So it could be anything. It could be negotiating that car that the salesperson's trying to use emotional tactics on us. It could be talking with a repair shop and saying, "Well, you don't need to do that because it doesn't need to be done." Or you can negotiate the repair cost, maybe the hourly rates, or whatever you come to a situation when you have a negotiation. Conflict. This is the one that is bound to happen in all teams, regardless of the team that you guys become a part of, whether now or in the future or in the past, you might have experienced this. In the workplace, conflict is bound to happen. Hopefully, it's not serious conflict, but there's five general areas that we can go when it comes to conflict. We can avoid conflict. Have you ever heard two people arguing and then they want to get you involved and you just kind of walk away? Well, you're avoiding that conflict. Some managers just say, handle it yourself, go away. So management doesn't get involved. They avoid dealing with that conflict. The avoidance is one of the things that a lot of people tend to try if they can. Now, we can also defer the conflict. If we're having a disagreement, we can say, well, let's try talking about this later. I have to go do this, or I have to go do something, or I have a meeting, and that kind of puts the conflict on pause. But this also gives both sides some time to cool down as well, because they can rethink their situation. Now, sometimes people will just stew in this conflict and they come back even more ferocious. So we don't want to let things hang out there if we can solve them uh, easily or solve them quicker. So on the other side of avoid would be like the head on. We go straight at the conflict, and I'm sure we've all been guilty of this at one time or another. We just kind of snap and just verbally go back at the other person, and it could be something simple like we were having a bad day, and all of a sudden they just said something, and boom, there it is. You can see this on TV shows, in the movies, YouTube videos, TikToks, wherever else you get your video media sources. You'll find this. Um, but basically, you're basic. Think of like two rams that are just butting heads until one of them gives up. Uh, they could knock each other out, and that might be it. They might have to go to that level of, like, in the animal world, rams keep butting their heads until one that gets knocked out, and that's how they determine who is the let's say the alpha ram, or who won that argument, whatever a ram might have an argument about. We can also delegate. Now, this one is basically shifting the responsibility to deal with the conflict to somebody else. So let's say you're the office manager, or the manager of the department, or whatever the appropriate title is in your area of expertise. You might say, well, go to human resources, go to HR, or go to this person, and they'll hear both sides and resolve this. So you're delegating that responsibility to resolve this conflict as a manager to somebody else. And we have this in our world already. We have judges, like when there's a conflict between two parties and there's lawsuits. Well, that's a conflict, and so they go before a judge, and a judge decides, or they go to in front of a mediator, an arbiter, and make the decision. So this is one where you basically get a third party who's not on either side to resolve it. So this could be just your manager coming in and say, "Hey, you two quit it, knock it off. I don't care who's at fault or whatnot. Just get back to work, or whatever the appropriate phrasing is." And then we have compromise. So this is also in negotiation as well, but compromising is it's more than the phrase "we agree to disagree." Because no one feels like they successfully resolved conflict that way. If you've ever said that yourself, or someone said that to you, you never really agreed to disagree. You just were tired of arguing or having that conflict continue. I know I've been that way. I've said that to people when logic has failed. I'm more of a logical person, so when logic fails and I'm just dumbfounded by the logic failing because they're not seeing the logic, I just, okay, we agree to disagree. And I don't feel like I was successful in the conflict, and the other side doesn't either. So compromise, though, we can find something to compromise to. Someone might change their actions a little bit. The other side changes their actions a little bit. So you meet in the middle and both agree to move forward like that. I'm using it where there's two sides in the conflict, but having both sides agree to a an alternative, like the best alternative to that conflict, the resolution of the conflict. I was going to say something along the lines of negotiation. In negotiation, we have the best alternative to a negotiated agreement, also called a BATNA, BATNA. But that doesn't really line up word wise with conflict. But we can come up with the best alternative to conflict resolution, maybe. So compromise is usually the outcome, but we do try the other ones. So if you guys think of the conflicts and the negotiations you guys have had over the years, you might come up and say, "Yeah, this is what I used there. This is what I used on this other one. And, this one is how this ended, but it wasn't really the best way to end that." So we do have a lot of experience just in our personal lives outside of the classroom. Chapter 16, program management, is pretty logical in my opinion. So projects are focused on one unique deliverable, where programs are the next level of hierarchy above programs, above projects. I'm sorry. So projects are for one unique deliverable or one unique deliverable, and programs usually have many projects or several projects that are related. So if you think, let's say, of a hospital, there might be several areas undergoing renovation at a time. Let's say pediatrics is being renovated, general surgery is being renovated, and some other departments. Well, each one of those would be a project, but there's probably a program above that, maybe called the renovation program, that is overseeing all the renovation projects in the hospital at the same time. So this is just another level of management that is useful. Program managers can help remove challenges, obstacles, get you resources, help obtain funding if funding is not adequate for your project, and more. So, program managers are are useful, and above them, is portfolio managers. So portfolios generally have several programs and maybe a couple projects that don't fall under a program. So it's just a more formal structure. And when we put it all together, we have something called a project management office. So it says on the slide, formal structure to oversee portfolios, programs, and projects. Organizations that have a PMO or project management office are generally more mature companies. They're more well established. They've been around for a while. Um, and they might be heavy into projects, which necessitates them to have something to oversee all the projects. So, this is something that every company might call it different. Like the project management office is the standard name. That's the universally known name for these offices or departments. But it could be just called the Office of Project Management, or it could just be the PMO, or some form of title that suits that company and how what the company does. So it might be called something different in, let's say, the hospitality industry, or in the healthcare industry, or in the let's say logistics industry. They might be called something different based on the needs of that industry. So program management is very useful, especially if you run into challenges. They are the ones that are more experienced in project management. So they are great resources. The people that are leading these offices and are generally senior project managers or program managers or even portfolio managers that can give you advice whenever you need it. And believe me, you're going to need advice quite frequently. If you need a mentor, they're there for you. If you need, like I mentioned earlier, resources, money, obstacles removed, challenges addressed, they're the ones that can help you do that. They may or may not do it for you, but they are the ones that will make sure you have the tools you need to do your project. Another function of the project management office is change management. Now, in part three of your project portfolio, you guys are going to be doing a change, a change, how, a change request form. So, in larger companies that have a PMO, these change requests will go to the PMO, and they will do the evaluation on whether to accept the change or not, and how it's going. And they'll look at how it's going to impact the project, the program, or portfolio, and the organization as a whole. Uh, these are points of view you, as a project manager, may not have. Now, if they've reviewed the change and they've approved it, they just tell you it's approved. You, as a project manager, may be asked for your opinion or your thoughts on a change. So don't be afraid to let them know your thoughts. It could be something you're like, well, that's going to cost way too much to do, or that's going to be real easy to do. Whatever the case may be, let them know. So, program management, like I've been saying, is a great resource, especially if you have a project management office or whatever your organization calls the office. If you don't know what it is, ask. There should be no difficulty in letting you know what the office is called or getting you in contact with them. Just like in your current organizations, if you ask, you know, who does this, hopefully somebody knows and you can get in touch with them. So that is chapter 16, and it, like I said, great resource, negotiation and conflict management. Great skills to have, and we're developing those throughout our lives. So if you're not very good at negotiating or conflict management, don't worry about it. It will come with time because experience is the best teacher, right? So let's go ahead and talk about, if I get there, portfolio part three. So you're going to develop these, and I didn't change the slide, but you can submit these as separate files. You don't have to put them as one file to eCampus. But you guys are going to be creating these four things. So we have the issue log. So whenever you guys run into problems or challenges or difficulties, you would log it. You would put it on basically a spreadsheet, and it would be out there, and there would be other columns that you'd have, such as how did you deal with this issue? What did you have to get involvement from a stakeholder? Did you have to get an executive or senior manager or director? Did you have to involve the PMO, the project management office, or whatnot? That way, if you run into this issue again within your project, you can look at your issue log and say, well, how did we do it before? And that way you don't have to reinvent the wheel each time. Now, hopefully you didn't run into the same exact issue. That's a whole nother problem. So I'm not going to go there, but hopefully you don't. It should be different each time. And this log is also useful for other project managers who may be doing a similar project to look and see what challenges or issues you ran into and how did you address it in your project. Because they don't have to reinvent the wheel either. They can just go, oh, this person did this, so I'm going to go ahead and try that in my project. Oh, it worked. Great. And they can put it in their issue log that they ran into the problem and that their resolution was to look at what you did and it worked out good, and that kind of thing. So the issue log is excellent for long-term records that are at the end of the project. So we come to this change management request. So I mentioned it a little bit earlier. So the change management request is a very simple document. If I recall correctly, we have a description of the change. Then you're going to have how it impacts the budget, the schedule, and the scope of the project. So a change is not only really affecting one area. For example, if you're going to change the scope of a project, Generally, your budget is going to need to be increased and your schedule is going to have to be increased because of the increase in scope. Now, it's also the same way in reverse. If you reduce the scope, you probably can reduce some of the budget needed and also some of the schedule needed. But if you're messing with the schedule, let's say the schedule needs to be, your project needs to be completed faster. Well, you probably are going to have a budget increase. Um, and then you might have to do something with your scope. Maybe you won't have enough time to get to the full scope of your project. So that so they have to figure out what are they going to give up. And this is where that project management office comes in wonderfully. If they want something done faster, usually that means something has to be given up. Because remember, you set up a schedule. You've estimated the amount of work that was needed for all the tasks that needed to be done through your work breakdown structure and your schedule estimate. So, how are we going to speed up your project without cutting something? The only other way we really can do that is speed it up and keep everything is to increase the budget to get more resources so things can be done faster. So, I mean, think of it logically when you're doing that. So, I want you to do a full change management request. You don't have to put anything on the approval lines, but I just want you guys to have an idea of how this document is and how to fill one out. Because even you, as a project manager, if you want to change something on the project, you have to go through this process as well. Now, you might have the approval to approve this change or have the ability to approve the change, but still, it needs to be documented. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. The communications plan. So you guys built a stakeholder register. You guys built the RACI matrix and a lot of other documents. And so, how are you going to communicate with these people? Are you going to be sending weekly emails? Are you going to be sending out press releases? Are you going to be sending out monthly reports? Or what? How are you going to communicate with the stakeholders you have? Now, remember, different groups of stakeholders need different levels of communication. So, the general public, maybe you issue a press release once every 6 months or once every quarter or something like that. The public doesn't need to know every single detail, whereas your team or maybe various people within your organization do need to know all the details, and maybe it does need to have a weekly email that's sent out to the team where the executives maybe just want a monthly report, a written report, or maybe there's a weekly meeting that you have to go in and talk about your project. That kind of stuff is in the communication plan. You can already figure out how you need to communicate with these people and how often and by what means ahead of time. So you don't have to guess later. This plan could always be modified. Let's say an executive went from they wanted a monthly report, but now because it's becoming a critical part of the project, they want to have a meeting twice a month. Well, you can change that in your communication plan later. These plans are living documents. They can change as we move forward. So the whole project management plan, which has a communication plan and other documents in it, is a living document. And then finally, the project status template. So this, I believe, is just like a PowerPoint slide. This is if you had to go in a meeting with executives, directors, senior managers, whatnot, how could you display the current status of your project? So imagine you're in the middle of your project. How could you present that information? And the template that's provided to you is a very simple template to use. It's you put in there, the challenges you're facing, the successes you've had. There's a little arrow, like a green arrow that says, let's say everything's good. People see green, they think good. They see red, they think bad. So so you have the details, the written part, but maybe people are only looking for that color that's in there, the red, green, yellow, or whatever appropriate colors the organization has chosen. So that is part 3. This is a real easy breeze through type portfolio parts. That's why I made these the last ones. The communication plan might take you, let's say, an hour to come up with. but the rest of them are very easy. The issue log, just come up with a few issues that, if, if you're coming up with an actual project, put down what actually happened. If it's something that you're kind of making up as you go, like a project you would like to see happen, what are some possible issues that affect that project? Change management requests. Just think of it. Maybe flip a coin. Is it a budget reduction? Is it a schedule change? Is it adding something to the project? You know, it's up to you guys on how you do these. Like I've been telling you guys for all the other parts of the project, I want you guys to take this and be more aware of what these documents are. And you guys are doing that. I am really impressed. Um, you guys are doing wonderful. I did not expect this level. And like I mentioned in the beginning of the semester, this is the second time the classes ran, and I'm going to have to make it harder for you guys because you guys are doing so well. So, well, not for you guys. The next cohort that's coming next spring. But as always, if you guys have questions, be sure to reach out to me and ask. My goal is to get to emails within 48 hours. I do make a serious attempt to reply to emails the same day um, when I can, if I'm not ill, like I was this past weekend. Or not ill. My wife and child were ill, and I think I caught something too. But we're over it. And those of you who sent your well wishes, I do appreciate it, and my family appreciates it. But I'm not going to take any more of your time. I want you guys to be successful. We only got basically a week and a half left. So we want to finish strong. So until next week, I'll see you in the email.